all of you with the cost of that transition. And look, we did not leave the Stone Age because we ran out of rocks. We came up with better ways to do things, and we know what those things are. Wind. Wind is the least expensive form of electricity generation right now in the United States. Why? Because of federal investments and subsidies to create the technology. We know how to do it, but we should be a common sense country that migrates our way there so you are not burdened with costs. That's why I favor carbon fee and dividend. We put a price on carbon, we give an incentive to move to fossil fuel-free economies, and we return the proceeds to the people who are economically impacted by it. But we operate on incentives and disincentives, and this government has done a terrible job to migrate to the decency and the fossil fuel-free economy that we need.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. Now, a little bit of politics and topical issue in the news. Colorado Supreme Court. I'm sure you both know where I'm going with this. Maine Secretary of State has ruled that Donald Trump not qualified to be on the state's ballots because they declare he engaged in an insurrection against the United States on January 6th. It's been in the news quite a bit. New Hampshire Secretary of State has said that such an important constitutional decision cannot be made at the state level alone. So in your view, and we'll start with, I think it's your turn, Congressman, who should decide this question and why?
The Supreme Court should decide the question. That's why we have a Supreme Court. Americans are losing faith in the Supreme Court, which is one reason I wish we had 18-year term limits there, which is a whole other conversation. Donald Trump is an unmitigated disaster. He's one of the most dangerous people in American history. I was subject to the insurrection that he inspired in the House chamber that day. All of you watched on TV. It was heartbreaking, disgusting, repulsive. With all that said, I'm very concerned because a majority of Americans favor him right now as our next president. That's the truth. And do I think it's appropriate for the legal system to take him off the ballots? Actually, I don't. I think he should be facing voters as the judge and jury, because if not, I'm very concerned about America's future, because I think violence will ensue. And I think it's better for our country, all of you, all of us on this stage and elsewhere, to mobilize to defeat him. That's why I'm running for president, because right now, Joe Biden is a risk to democracy because he is knowingly going into an election in which his approval numbers and his poll numbers make it almost impossible for him to win. I know Marianne feels the same way. We are the only two in the United States of America on the Democratic side of the aisle to stand up and tell you the truth. He's going to lose. He's going to lose.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Same question for you, ma'am.
For the most part, I agree with everything that Dean said. Under normal circumstances, I do think it would be reasonable for the legal system to decide. But I share Dean's fear about this, his deep concern, and I do think it should be a decision made by the Supreme Court.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that. So I couldn't help but notice we did coin flip out in the lobby a moment ago. You guys were very respectful of each other. You seem to genuinely like each other. And we don't see that a lot with our politicians.
Tell me about it.
Particularly opponents on stage. How do you get to a point to where you talk some of the extreme wings of your own party who've co-opted in a lot of ways? And we'll start with you, Marianne Williamson. How do you get them on board with bringing some civility back to the process?
I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the American people. The horse race is not what matters to me. The majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want universal health care. The majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want tuition-free college and tech school. The majority of Americans, Republicans as well as Democrats, including gun owners, want common sense gun safety laws. I'm not concerned about the civility or lack of civility in Congress. I'm concerned about the fact that they do more to serve the short-term profit maximization of their donors than they do to serve the safety, health, and well-being of the American people. I do not expect that every congressman and senator will necessarily like me. And I don't want to bring a bunch of Republicans and fiscal responsibility people into my cabinet so much. They have failed. And what I want to do is to be an advocate for the American people. And some people actually in Congress would not like me. And I would feel about them the same way that Franklin Roosevelt did. He called the people who represent the interests of corporate America over the interests of the people the economic royalists. They came at him, and they would come at me the same way, in Congress and out of Congress. They'd call me a socialist. They'd say everything that they said about him. And what he said was, I welcome their hatred. I'm not going into the presidency to people pleaser, so that anybody in Congress would necessarily like me or not. They'd respect me. I'd be fair, and I would be fair in negotiation, but I would not be quiet when they were not serving the people. I would go straight with the bully pulpit to the American people, and I would let you know who is obstructing your best interests, who they were donated to
Thank you.
by, what they were really
Thank you,
doing
ma'am.
in Washington. It would be you and me. They're secondary.
Sorry to keep
Equal
wrapping you
branch
up, but you
of the
keep going way over.
government, but I'd be tough. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. I'm sorry. Take a little extra time, sir. How would you bring it all together?
Well, I believe deeply in our Constitution, and the way our founders set up this country was we had to debate, deliberate, and then come to conclusions and solve our country's problems. That means we had to work together. George Washington warned us all about factions, about political parties. I told you earlier that is the biggest disaster in our country right now. With all that said, are we going to succeed by fighting each other? No. We're going to succeed by fighting for one another, and that is why I am proud to be the second most bipartisan member of Congress. That is why the first bill I had signed into law during the Trump administration was the Paycheck Protection Flexibility Act. I did it with Chip Roy. You all know who he is, the Freedom Caucus member? I'm the second most bipartisan member of Congress. He's probably 433. But I set out to become his friend early on. I got to know him because the Congress does everything to keep us separate. I will invest in working together. I will include Republicans at my table because if we don't, we can never expect them to include us at their table. We have got to change this nonsense. We cannot succeed unless we start respecting one another. That starts in the White House, and that's exactly how I intend to do it as our president.
And I have separate questions for each of you on the same topic. And Congressman, how have establishment Democrats treated you in Washington since you announced your campaign for the presidency?
With extraordinary hypocrisy and meanness and attacks, and it is disgusting. And
I agree with you on that.
And I think, and I got to tell you all, I've learned a lot. And I think we all have to keep open minds and open hearts as we go through life to recognize that we don't know it all. And the party in which I believed and invested, I enabled, I was part of, I was a House Democratic leader elected by my peers just last year to serve as one of the leaders. I went from a darling to a devil. Why? For practicing democracy, my friends, for practicing democracy. I will not have one colleague endorse me, people who really had affection for me and still do. They can't do that because every one of them wants to get reelected, and they don't want the Democratic Party to do to them what they're doing to me. Why do you think that Marianne and I are the only ones on the stage right now? Because people who actually aspire to lead the free world were too afraid to be on the stage for what the Democratic Party would do. The pain, it's hard. The pain is hard, but it is nothing like the pain being experienced by so many Americans, and I will persevere, I will take it, and I will take it all the way to the White House.
Great. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Please hold your applause. Ms. Williamson, along the same lines, we have to ask you a question. Listen, I mean, you get, obviously the DNC has made their decision in a lot of ways. You're not being considered by establishment Republicans. This is the first and only debate that you've had. How do you go down there, achieve your agenda, while also breaking up some of the probably hurt feelings on members of your own party?
The president does not have a magic wand. The president is not supposed to have a magic wand. As Dean himself pointed out, we have three co-equal branches of government. We've had Republican presidents who overreached and abused presidential power. But in my opinion, we've had some Democratic presidents who haven't used it enough, have been too much about these factions of men that actually, as Dean said, George Washington warned us about. He said political parties, he was afraid they would form factions of men who were more concerned with their party, with their faction, than with their country. And so these are sophisticated people, by the way. And once you become president, they understand that you are president. And they would feel, for me, great respect. They were elected by their constituents. They would feel my respect as that they're the members of Congress and members of the Senate. I'm sorry?
Probably a little sheepish, too.
I don't know about sheepish, but they would be aware that for the first time in a long time, there was a woman, well, first time was a woman, but the first time in a long time that there was a president who did not emerge from the political party structure, a president who emerged from the people, and there would be no doubt about it. I'm here to serve the people.
We have time for one more question before we get to closing statements. The hour goes by fast. In response to the rising cases of flu, COVID-19, respiratory illnesses, mask recommendations and mandates have returned in 6 states already, mostly at hospitals. In your view, Congressman, when is it appropriate for the federal government to issue mask requirements?
Well, first of all, anybody who's ever been in a hospital knows that surgeons and healthcare practitioners who've spent years in school and see the numbers and work in laboratories know that masks work. They prevent the transfer of illness. So let me start with this. If we are a country that cares about one another, if we're all patriots, we should be protecting one another. That means if we are sick, we should stay home. That means if we are sick, we shouldn't blow our nose in our hands and then shake hands. We should do it in our elbows, right? It's not rocket science. Imagine if we had a president who simply told us how to do this a little bit better by taking care of each other. Americans do not respond well to mandates, period. I think we should protect one another. I think it is terribly dangerous right now. We have a trio of terrible viruses going around the country, again around the world, and we've lost faith in the very government that is supposed to be protecting us. That is the responsibility of presidents. Donald Trump spent that equity. Joe Biden has done almost nothing to restore it. Nothing to restore it. That's exactly what I'll do. I think mask mandates are actually dangerous because it's dividing our country. I think all of us should choose to do it when we're sick so we do not get others sick, period.
Thank you, Congressman. Mask mandates.
Well, we are undergoing a new surge of COVID right now, the largest since the Omicron. And we should be very concerned about that, and we should be very concerned about long COVID. Long-haul COVID sufferers is something that the government should be putting far more attention on, not only in terms of treatment, which we will have with my whole health plan, universal health care, Medicare for all types situation, which, by the way, does as much to proactively create a healthy society in which we will be less vulnerable to such diseases as it does to treat diseases when they are among us. I do think it's time to be giving away some free masks and to be giving away some free tests now for people who want them. As far as mandates, that's left to the states, and I agree with Dean. It's such a divisive topic at this point.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And we are to reach the point where we're going to have closing statements. We flipped a coin earlier, as I mentioned. I'm going to be, I got to keep the clock here, so try to keep it right around the 90-second mark so I don't have to cut anybody off.
You should be honest, we flipped a penny. I've never seen that before,
It's the
actually.
only thing I can find.
See, times are tough, you see. We had to use a penny. Look, I started this, first of all, thank you. The courage of you all showing up and being participants is beautiful, remarkable, and I love you all. I don't care about your politics, and I mean that sincerely. I started by telling you I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. I'm doing it now, and I'm going to do it as your president. And I'm going to end this the same way. Joe Biden should have been right here with us today.
I agree with that.
He is taking the Granite State for granted. He is taking this election for granted, and he is taking every single one of you and this entire country for granted. He should be campaigning in New Hampshire. He should be showing up in front of voters. He should be on the ballot in New Hampshire, for goodness sakes. He's the president of the United States of America. And we all know this. But instead, we are seeing literally the hypocrisy of democracy. It is not protecting democracy when you remove your competitors from the ballot, as he has done in Florida and North Carolina. It is not protecting democracy when you refuse to even participate in a single debate in the United States of America. It is not protecting the soul of the nation when the nation is more divided than ever. And it is not protecting us when we have an unmitigated disaster at our border and 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck and 40% cannot afford a $400 emergency. That is not protecting democracy. That's actually why democracy is failing right now, all around the world, because people cannot maintain their lives. It's too expensive. So that's why I'm running for president. That's why I'm in Congress. I'm trying to create change. And I will be that change, a new generation, to represent all of you. Some of you will be in my White House because I need you. If you're ready for it, please go to dean24.com. I would love for you to join the Dean team, join this movement, and replace the past, and let's move to the future. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. 1 second. You can applause all you want in a moment. Please take your time.
We don't need another political car mechanic. The problem is that we're on the wrong road. We don't need another technocrat. We need someone with vision. We have very difficult problems in this country today. And in addition to all the threats to democracy that Biden has spoken about and that Dean has spoken about, such as the president not even being here, the greatest threat to our democracy is the destruction of the American middle class and the failure of our government to restore it. This is tough. This is a very difficult time. But we have had ancestors who rose to the challenge before. We responded to slavery with abolition. We responded to the institutional suppression of women with the women's suffrage movement. We responded to the Gilded Age with the establishment of organized labor, and we responded to segregation with the civil rights movement. It's our turn now. We will respond to the institutional greed of a matrix of corporate overlords. That is how we will get out of this mess. We need an economic U-turn. I don't want to go to Washington and fight for you. I want to go to Washington and co-create with you a new chapter in American history. The same forces I would have to be dealing with in Washington, you have to deal with here in Concord. Because there are undemocratic forces in our country today, just as there have been in other generations. Let's not be the first generation to wimp out on doing what it takes to put this country back on track. Government has become a puppet, a system of legalized bribery to the powers of the corporate interests, which are their donor base. That will end with me. I will stand up to that. And my presidency will be one in which not only in Washington, but throughout this country, there will be such a sense that we, the American people, are on the move. We will be, once again, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And all of us will know.
Let's hear it for Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us here today.
Thank
For
you.
those listening on Sirius XM, have a great night. Don't forget to vote.
Everybody.
Thank you, Pastor.
Sorry, I had to keep
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.